Here.
Chairman Londa.
Present. Thank you. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, next we'll move on to any board comments and announcements. So everyone's having a nice summer and staying cool. We will check in to see if you have any public comment at the time. We don't have any public comments. Good. And we'll move to the approval of the minutes. This was the meeting from June 25th. Have a motion to approve. So. I'll second. Thank you. Motion second, please vote. Board Member Spellish? Board Member Bontel? Yes. Board Member Nunez? Yes. Board Member Joyce? Board Member Becker? Yes. Vice Chair Garcia?
Yes.
Chairman Londa? Yes. Moving on to our consent calendar, we have 4 items on our consent calendar. Is there any discussion or would I have a motion to approve? I'll move to approve the consent calendar. Consent. Thank you. Please vote. Board Member Spellish?
Yes.
Board Member Bontel? Yes. Board Member Nunez? Yes. Board Member Joyce? Board Member Becker? Yes. Vice Chair Garcia?
Yes.
Chairman Londa? Yes, thank you. Now we'll move on to reports. Item 5, our CEO report. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board, Chair. It's good to be here today. We're going to do something a little different today. This is the CEO report. You'll notice it'll be quite brief. We've extracted from this program just update, which will follow in item 6. So just moving quickly through this high-level statistics by member agency. You can see there that CBA is now serving 257,291 customers. And you can see the breakout of customers and fee impact, that plus and fee impact, and still maintaining a high participation rate of 93%. We'll note that the fee impact product has seen increased membership by virtue of our rate relief credit. So that's something that we're tracking and we'll report to you on a regular basis. Our staff has been hard at work again, engaging with our community members out in our service territories, meeting folks. Here are some of the events that they attended. On behalf of CBA, I'm not going to go through all of these. Again, our effort is to try to spread the events out through all the member agencies, and we've been doing a pretty good job with that. We have a very busy month coming up in August, as you can see there. Again, just trying to reach out to different areas of our service territory. And then, of course, on an annual basis, we participate in the Public Utilities Commission Small and Diverse Business Expo, as well as their diversity en banc. So we, again, will be attending that in San Francisco this year. Again, want to thank our staff for their continued diligence in getting out to our communities and engaging with our customers. As I mentioned, we have a rate relief credit as of February 1st, which established a rate for people to save money on their electricity costs. You can see here that since February 1st, when the rate relief credit went into effect for our clean impact products, we now have a total of 216 opt-downs, well below our projected, for budgetary purposes, of projected thresholds. And finally, a staffing update. At the June meeting, the board approved our fiscal year 26-27 budget. As part of that, authorized 4 positions in the next fiscal year. We're actively recruiting for 2 of those positions, which were identified in that budget approval: a rate specialist or analyst, a marketing specialist or analyst. We're keeping the flexibility of hiring at either of those 2 classifications, dependent on qualifications of the candidate pool. And those positions are open until filled. However, we do have the first deadline for review and interviewing of August 14th, and we are tracking to those recruitments. And that concludes the CEO report.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Chair, I have a comment. I wanted to see for attending our State of the City Address yesterday evening. It was a great event. Thank you for the participation and engagement. I really appreciate that. We continue to be out in the community and relaying for important information to our customers, our residents. So thank you for being there.
Okay, nice, okay, thank you. I really appreciate seeing the list of events too. Those shows as well. Meeting all of our stakeholders and constituents out there. Appreciate that. All right, we'll go ahead and move to item 6, our programs report.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. Again, as I mentioned, we are breaking this programs report out. We'll do so on a biannual basis. You will continue to see the program reports in the CEO operational report on a regular basis. But we did want to make sure that the board and the public at large has the ability to see some insight into the programs and where we are with them. This is not an unusual format to look at. The Solar Plus and Battery Bonus projects. Included among these columns is the Connect program. As you may recall, the Connect program was for income eligible self-generation incentive program funded projects. As you can see, we are still making steady progress with applications on all of our battery, Solar Plus and Battery Bonus programs. Particularly want to draw attention to the Battery Bonus Connect program, which had a high enrollment, and we are getting a lot of projects completed there. So happy to see that progress in those programs. As I just mentioned, the ESSA funding, again, it helps to show that we were successful in applying for much of these funds for our Connect programs to help those who need help and want to take advantage of energy saving programs such as solar and battery, or if you already had solar, the battery program. We hope to continue to run out these programs, not just on the ESSA funded side, but looking at other ways to enhance our program funding for these programs. Our Peak Smart Savers program is actively in its second year of the pilot. We now have a total of 58 customers. I believe we've already called 4 Peak Smart days this year, and we are expecting more hot weather to come up, and we're actively looking at how customer behavior is responding around the demand response notifications, the event notifications, see if customers are taking advantage of or reducing their use rather during that peak demand time. So a lot still to be learned, and we'll report back to you at the end of this calendar year to show you what we've learned with this program. But hopefully we can get more folks enrolled so our analysis will show a larger pool of people and what might be accomplished with this program. We are actively engaging now on the Equitable Building Decarbonization Program, and part of our outreach effort included a food distribution outreach in Oceanside at the Chavez and Crown Heights Community Centers. We were able to make contact with customers, provide information, and see there effective, and as much as we connected with 136 people, and we have identified events in Vista, San Marcos, and Escondido for these programs. And in case you're wondering, those are targeted areas because there are eligibility restrictions based on income and census tract. Those are the areas, the communities in which those census tracts are located, and that's why we're providing that outreach, targeted outreach to those communities. And of course, we're going to continue to support our single family and multifamily enrollments for these programs. This is an effective way for folks to reduce their energy costs, and we're excited to get this program rolled out. And then similar to our own Equitable Building Decarbonization Program, the San Diego Regional Energy Network has launched and now is actively taking applications, enrollment applications for 8 of its 10 programs they anticipate rolling out. They're a regional effort to provide energy efficiency programs throughout the San Diego County. While it's primarily headed up by San Diego Community Power in the County of San Diego, it's a countywide program. We've been actively engaged with those entities from the beginning, since its inception, and our customers are eligible for this program as well. It was approved by the Public Utilities Commission in August of 2024, and as I said, it's taken some time to get going, but we're now actively enrolling in 8 of the 10 programs. They have categories for residential, workforce development, commercial properties, public agencies, codes and standards, and tribal governments. And the website, sdren.org, is active and has the ability to get information about the programs as well as to enroll in those that have been launched. So we're as much a partner in this as anyone, and we're trying to get the word out on this program as well. And that concludes the programs update.
Thank you, Greg. Were there any public speakers on this item? We don't have any public speakers on this item. Any comments from the board? I just have one clarifying question, Greg. The decarbonization program, looks like next steps are a series of events. But can you tell a little bit more about how the program will reduce energy costs for customers?
Yes, so this program will look to provide energy decarbonization programs, with basic energy efficiency programs, think meters, smart meters, or physical improvements to your homes, whether it's through windows or reduced LED lighting, those kinds of efficiency programs. Kind of low-hanging fruit all the way up to more significant building improvements that can decrease carbon emissions and increase the use of more sustainable energy efficiency practices. So it's a whole grab bag of different items that might be available to those applicants, and it's really intended to start from very minor basic improvements up to some more that can help not just residents, but for single family and multi-family residents.
I'll just make one comment and give an update to the board. Myself, a member of UNIS, we have been on a subcommittee reviewing our programs, and this is a presentation from staff that is the first rollout programs, but we are expecting to see more. Could you give us a sense of the timeline, Greg, of when we might return on this topic and hear more about programs?
Yeah, so we will expect as they come rolling out to be able to come back to the board on a regular basis.
For
So
approvals?
yeah, and those kinds of things. There, some of the, and by the way, I just wanted to touch base on something more significant improvements. But think of heating and cooling, heat pump water heaters, building envelope improvements to seal homes, those kinds of things, induction cooking. They're the kinds of energy efficiency things you've heard of in the past when many jurisdictions were looking at electrification regulations. Think of those types of improvements, electric laundry equipment, for example. So really trying to decarbonize the off gas as well as higher energy usage. But we would expect to come back on a regular basis. If these programs are rolling out and you feel it's important to get the word out and provide feedback or approval from them, that's necessary. We'll obviously be back on an as needed basis.
Any comments on this?
No, I really appreciate diving into this space. I think our residents are definitely looking for us to provide any kind of relief that we can, and I think this will be a great way to deliver to our customers.
I agree, it's one of the opportunities we have as leadership aggregate to develop programs. So I really appreciate that and ongoing participation from the entire board. All right, with that item completed, we'll move on to item 7 for our Risk Oversight Committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I introduce Dan, I just wanted to let you know that this is going to be a recurring item, quarterly report. Our Risk Oversight Board, without stealing Dan's thunder, meets on a quarterly basis, and this is a way for the board and the public to gain some insight as to what our Risk Oversight committee discusses. Obviously, there are some confidential matters that won't be discussed here in this forum, but it's in the interest of transparency and having folks be able to see some of the things that we discuss, comply with our risk management and energy policies. We're doing this again on a quarterly basis to Dan. Go ahead.
Is working. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board. Again, I'm Senior Power Procurement Manager. As Greg mentions, the Risk Oversight Committee meets quarterly. The group is comprised of Chair and Vice Chair of the board, Council, and then Finance, Procurement, and C-suite staff from CEA. We discussed this in more detail beyond this, but we tried to provide sort of a high-level summary without giving away some of the sort of market confidential information that hurts us in negotiation when going. This first slide here is speaking to market trends that the Risk Oversight Committee discusses and providing an overview of those. First up, we're going to start with the energy prices. This is sort of the price of wholesale energy for California at CAES, and it's representative of the cost of just day-to-day energy provided to our customers. And just to orient you to the graph on the left here, what this is showing is different points in time for each of the lines. If we were to go out and buy energy for the upcoming year, so on the left, you see what the price of energy is on average for July 2026. The whole way through June 2027. So the way to think about this would be that gray line would be as of July 2025, if we were to go out and purchase energy on average for this upcoming year, what the prices were for that energy. And then if you were to go out to market in September 2025, the blue line, which is the next one down, was how much that energy would have cost if you bought it at that point. And then December, February, and then so the light blue line is as of pretty much last month, if you were to go out and try and buy energy for the upcoming year. So what you can see in this is the trend is over time, the sort of forward price for energy for the period of this next fiscal year has been going down from that gray line down to where it currently sits, the blue line. Although it kind of hit a bit of a floor between February and June, you can see there's not much of it between the yellow line and the lighter. This decrease is pretty similar to what we've seen for a number of years over the past couple of years. There was a spike in energy prices from 2022 to 2024, where if you would have looked at a graph like this, for those periods, you see the lines climbing over the course of time. But from 2024 until now, we've seen prices sort of gradually coming down. And also, as you get closer to the actual day of, the prices have been coming down. So that's good news in terms of as we go out and buy energy for our customers, that energy is cheap. The next bullets on the right there, we don't have graphs for these, discuss into that confidential area, but speak to renewable and carbon-free pricing, so pricing for the renewable and carbon-free energy that we supply to our customers, and then finally the last RA. And while it doesn't have the same kind of curve aspect to it, or that looks quite the same as this, but just generally speaking, we've seen similar trends in market prices for renewable energy and for resource adequacy for customers. So there was a huge spike in 2023, 2024, and prices have really come down a lot, even more so than energy prices. You see kind of like a 30% decrease in these numbers. For RA renewable prices, it was at an 80%, 90% decrease from the highs that we saw in 2023. So all that is generally good news. If you start to look out further into the future, there tends to be just a little bit higher price than the current prices, and then it drops today. But that's just kind of the current market dynamic. I saw one question. Do you mind if I get through just this next question? So the next section here just goes into CEA's approach to mitigate risk and to meet the RA energy and renewable energy needs of our customers. So this slide is just at a high level, speaks to what our requirements are from a risk management policy and then also the strategy beyond those requirements. The core piece of our risk management policy that speaks to energy procurement is we are required to be hedged up to 90% of our expected energy demand as of the month before we're actually going to be supplying that demand. And this is referring to energy specifically, so the lines that were on the previous graph would be purchasing that energy for our customers. Beyond that requirement, we do also have a credit line, which CFO Andy Stern has spoken to on various presentations he's given. That credit line has requirements of sort of similar sort of percentage hedging that we need to have going 1 year out and 2 years out. And so what it ends up meaning is that we have this set of requirements that mean we need to procure a portion of our energy, let's just say 40% as of 2 years out, and up to 60% purchased as of 1 year out, and then 90% as of the month ahead. And as a result, when we go out and buy energy, we usually issue solicitations that are looking for a small piece of the total amount of energy that customers need going out 3 to 4 years, and are sort of gradually taking down the amount we expect to need for our customers over time. That allows us to be flexible if our forecast for demand change, while it's also not trying to time the market exactly on the exact lowest point. It's possible that trends need to keep coming down, but it's also possible that prices could go up. And so this is kind of more of a just measured approach rather than trying to be day traders and time the market to exactly get the best possible returns. We follow a similar strategy for our other products, so renewable energy and resource adequacy. Part of that is done through long-term contracts, PPAs, which are setting a fixed price for energy or resource adequacy or some combination of products over 10, 15, even longer periods of time. So that kind of locks in, similar to hedging, and locks in the cost that product will cost us for the foreseeable future. And then we layer in shorter term agreements on top of that to get up to the full need that our customers have for renewable energy and for RA. So it ends up being a pretty similar approach in terms of not trying to time things perfectly, adding on slices of the total expected need that we have for these different products, and not trying to time the market in a particular period, while also, obviously we issue solicitations and trying to get the best value we need. And then this is the last slide in this stuff. The questions, this is now speaking to what our positions actually are at a high level again. So we are compliant, and this is all discussed in more detail in the Oversight committee meeting. We are compliant with our hedging requirements, the risk management policy, and also the credit line requirements for that going out 1 to 2 years. We have already procured practically all of what we think we'll need for 2026, depending on where our load falls and where some sort of variable and for renewable energy and carbon-free energy, as well as RA. And then looking out a year, we've mentioned this before, but since the way that our product is structured, our renewable requirement will soon be approaching what our carbon-free requirement is. That's the 75% carbon-free. And so as of now, pending future decisions on this, we wouldn't need any more carbon-free to get to 75%. 75% renewable, so that requirement would drop off, depending on how we decide to change ours. Going out 1 or 2 years, we've started to make short-term purchases for the other products. And then finally, the last bullets speak to some of our other procurement requirements from a compliance standpoint. The state requires us to meet midterm reliability requirements, which is to bring on new capacity to the grid to help ensure the overall grid reliability. Especially they set these requirements back in 2021 for 2028, so projects to be online. And we have contracts in place to meet all of those needs for 2028. And then there's an upcoming board item today about another project which will help us get to expected full compliance for the 2030 to 20 different order that was just released recently. So with those, we're expecting to be in good shape for all of those sort of longer term new build procurement order regulatory obligations. And then finally, the last bullet is just an update on where some of the past PPAs have been signed are. The first one, the Deer Creek project, is much very recently, is in the past day or two, reaching operations. So that was very exciting. Big great news on that one. And then there are a couple of other ones that are approved by the board coming online over the next year or 2 years. Those are part of the requirement, but those are new renewable energy projects. Meeting these needs and also providing more renewable energy to grid products. Any questions on that?
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. I have been reading about this company, Vacancies, and their San Diego headquarters now. Apparently, I was just curious if that's on our radar. We have a solar project for them. There's solar and battery storage.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. They're Avantis and a number of other developers are ones we've either reached out to or who have submitted projects in some of our solicitations. The projects that they would submit would be ones that would come in through one of our sort of RFPs. And whenever we put out those RFPs, we very specifically say we're interested in local projects, we're interested in new solar and storage projects, and we set other sort of guidelines around what we're looking for. I can't speak to exactly what we've gotten from specific people, but we've definitely been in contact with them. Or always, every time we speak to a developer, we're talking about our desire to build local projects and asking them to. We don't have a contract.
Appreciate it. Is anyone down here? Joyce?
All right, thank you so much.
Hand it over to Steve.
All right, thank you. Christina Byrd, Finance Manager, CEA. So first I'm going to cover our credit line and provider of last resort or forward covenant. Okay, so for the covenant compliance metrics and forecast, on the table that you see on this slide, you can see that as of March 31st, 2026 for JP Morgan, we're meeting and far exceeding both the debt service credit ratio and days liquidity on hand. And we expect to meet these for all quarters going forward. We also have a $40 million credit line that extends through February 2029. It's currently not being utilized. We haven't drawn anything against it. We don't have any plans right now to utilize it. And then for the provider of last resort or POLR metrics that are required by the CPUC, we are meeting all covenants there as well. They're very similar to the JP Morgan covenants, except for the debt service credit ratio covenant is actually a little bit lower. But we do expect to meet all covenants for the foreseeable future. Okay, and then I just have a couple of slides to give an update on the energy prepayment transaction that CEA began engaging in earlier this year. Let's see. So this is a history of everything that's happened to date with the transaction. So going back to February of 2026, that's when we issued the RFP for Municipal Financial Advisor Services. And through that RFP, we selected PFM, who came and presented to the board on April 30th, 2026, and had an energy prepayment discussion, and the board approved the professional services agreement with PFM Financial Advisors. So that was executed on May 1st. And then with PFM's help on May 28th, we issued 2 different RFPs, one for the underwriter or counterparty bank in the transaction, and then one for the legal services, which included both bond and tax counsel and disclosure counsel. So we did bring back 2 of the respondents for the underwriter for interviews, which we did a couple weeks ago to make our selection. So today on the consent items, we did bring an item to request board approval for the professional services agreement with Chapman and Cutler LLP, which is for the Disclosure Council. Okay, so just to give a little bit more background on that RFP process. So again, as I mentioned, we had 2 different RFPs issued on May 28th. The responses for those were due on June 17th. So for the Disclosure and Bond Tax Council, when we issued the RFP, we asked for and/or on those services. However, the Disclosure Council is really to ensure that the information being provided to investors is accurate and complete. And then the Bond and Tax Council is for services related to the bonds themselves to make sure that the structure of the bond is legal and valid. So being this is our first transaction, we did want to definitely cover both bases. So of the 5 respondents that we received, several of them offered one or the other service, but not both. So we went ahead and selected Chapman and Cutler LLP, who's going to provide the Disclosure Council. And then we'll be selecting ORIC for our Bond and Tax Council. We do not have a contract to approve for ORIC, as they provide counsel to the bond directly that's issued through the California Community Choice Financing Authority, or the CCCFA. They'll contract directly with the CCCFA, so we won't ever actually enter into a formal agreement, but we will advise them to use ORIC for that counsel. And then on the second RFP for the underwriter or counterparty services, we received 4 responses. As I mentioned before, we brought back our 2 top candidates to do interviews with our team and with PFM. And through that process, we selected Goldman Sachs as our prepaid counterparty. They have tons of experience in these transactions, specifically in California, and a lot of experience working with first-time CCA transactions. So we felt comfortable bringing them on board. All right, so now that we've built what we kind of consider as the prepaid team, our next steps are to execute the agreement with Chapman and Cutler for the Disclosure Council, which we will do tomorrow, assuming that it's all approved. And then we will start meeting with that transaction team, so Chapman and Cutler, PFM, Goldman Sachs, and we'll establish a timeline for the rest of the transaction. So into August through September, into October, we'll be preparing all of the documents, preparing the structure of the transaction, establishing what PPA assignments that we want to include in the transaction, finalizing all of our deal documents, and then late into the fall, we will start engaging the rating agencies on the bonds. So if everything goes according to plan, we are looking at finalizing the prepayment energy transaction and closing this out by the end of this calendar year. All right, and then lastly for this presentation, just going to touch on the anticipated topics for the Q3 and Q4 agenda. So as we're working through this bond prepayment, we will continue to update the committee on the work that we're doing. And of course, if there's any slowdowns on our anticipated timeline, we'll also be reviewing the energy risk management policy and reviewing the first months of the Deer Creek PPA performance that Dan mentioned is coming online. Okay, and that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Any questions? We appreciate your work on this. Looking forward to that prepayment opportunity. Thank you. All right, now we'll move to our public hearings. We have one public hearing, so this time I'll go ahead and open that. This is amending our rate schedule to update the wholesale market access tariff effective August 1st.
Thank you. For those online, so Christina Bird, Finance Manager with CEA. So Chairman Lendes, Vice Chair Garcia, and members of the board, this is a public hearing item to update the rates for CEA's wholesale market access tariff, or what I'll refer to as the WMAT throughout this presentation. It's a special rate intended for our high energy users within our territory. Great. So today we're recommending that the board conduct the public hearing and approve resolution 2026-037, amending Clean Energy Alliance rate schedule to update the wholesale market access tariff rate effective August 1st, 2026. Okay, so this is a rate that is available to our non-residential CEA customers with an annual load greater than 150 gigawatt hours per year. We do maintain this portfolio separate of the rest of our customers due to its size, and it currently includes one account. So for the rate setting for the WMAT agreement, we're required to look at total energy costs, which do include CEA administrative costs, and then divide that by our projected annual usage to come up with the energy component to set that rate to ensure that we're able to cover our costs for the portfolio. So this table just includes a background of all the actions that have happened throughout establishing this program and updating the rates. So the first line, the Wholesale Market Access Tariff Program terms and conditions were approved on October 25th, 2023. And then the first rate was adopted in October 2024. CEA conducted a public hearing in July 2025, and that updated the rate effective August 1st, 2025. Another public hearing was held on November 20th, 2025, and the current rate, which is 11.759 cents per kilowatt hour, was approved effective January 1st, 2026. And today we're recommending to reduce that rate to 10 cents per kilowatt hour effective August 1st, 2026. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any comments from the board and any public comments? Don't have any public comment on this item. Okay, then I'll go ahead and make a motion to close the public hearing and adopt the resolution. Second? We have a motion and a second, please go. Board Member Spellish? Board Member Bonfil? Yes. Board Member Nunez? Yes. Board Member Jones? Board Member Becker? Yes. Vice Chair Garcia?
Yes.
Chair Melendez? Thank you all. Next, we'll move on to new business, starting with the regulatory update.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Melendez, Vice Chair Garcia, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to come and present to you again. Today, I'm going to cover three general regulatory topics that we've been actively working on. I'm going to talk briefly about two related CPUC proceedings affecting energy efficiency program administration and funding specific to the San Diego region. I'm going to talk about some new developments in resource adequacy, and I'm going to give a quick procedural but important update in SDG&E's 2025 ERA compliance proceeding. Next slide, thank you. So there are two main proceedings here, both impacting San Diego regional energy efficiency programming. And in both, we are advocating on behalf of both SDCP and their capacity as an administrator of SDREN, as well as Clean Energy Alliance. First is SDG&E's application to withdraw as an energy efficiency program administrator. I provided an update on this to you about 6 months ago. As a reminder, SDG&E is arguing that its energy efficiency portfolio of programs has not been cost effective and that participation has been very low. And therefore, they're making the argument that energy efficiency programming is not a good use of ratepayer funding and it should be ceased and they should stop being a program administrator. Our advocacy in this proceeding has focused on emphasizing that SDG&E's performance as a portfolio administrator should not be mistaken for failure of energy efficiency itself. Energy efficiency remains an important least cost resource to promote affordability and customer bill management, and is an important part of the tools in our toolbox to serve load. So our position is that the Commission should preserve energy efficiency funding in the San Diego region and create better paths for local administrators, including SDREN and potentially CEA, to fill gaps if SDG&E is allowed to withdraw. And then the second proceeding, this is the energy efficiency rulemaking, where the commission is considering changes to the funding formula mechanism that allows CCAs to elect to administer energy efficiency funding. The issue for CEA, as a reminder, is that the current formula really disadvantages smaller CCAs, especially in smaller IOU territories, which makes reform especially important if SDG&E exits in San Diego, because customer options will be limited currently to SD-REN programming. And if customers want to see more options, there needs to be more opportunities for other program administrators to step in. And so we're pushing to preserve funding and create workable local paths for the San Diego region by seeking a new funding mechanism that will allow CEA to get ETA funding that's sufficient to run a portfolio of effective energy efficiency programming. Next, I'm going to talk about some recent developments in resource adequacy. In the resource adequacy rulemaking, the Commission in July issued Decision 2607-008. This decision changed some key contract rules for newer CAISO capacity products related to day-ahead energy market enhancements and extended day-ahead markets. For future contracts, these new rules now require $0 bidding for reliability capacity and generally require that load-serving entities retain reliability capacity and most imbalanced reserve revenues. This is important for CEA to practically to ensure contract fungibility. Some of the older upstream, all older upstream contracts could be harder to resell if they don't include required bidding and revenue terms that are now required pursuant to this decision. So bottom line is that future contracts need to comply with these new terms. Keys and Fox is already working with CEA procurement teams to modify the existing short-term procurement forms, but any existing contracts that CEA is under for RA might need to be amended to the extent that CEA wants to preserve its ability to resell those on the market so that they comply with the current requirements. And then finally, a quick procedural update in the 2025 SDG&E ERA compliance proceeding. SDG&E filed its annual 2025 application on June 1st of this year. The first issue here in the scoping memo is sort of the routine annual question that we look at in every ERA compliance proceeding as to whether SDG&E prudently administered its own generation resources during the record period and adequately recorded all revenues and expenses so that the rates charged to customer, both through ERA and PCIA, were accurate. The more important issue and more interesting issue here is that the scoping memo also asks whether SDG&E administered resource adequacy procurement and sales consistent with its bundled procurement plan. And that matters because one of our main concerns for years in this proceeding has been whether SDG&E has retained too much excess RA beyond what it needs to serve its own load, instead of making it available for resale. Of course, if excess RA is withheld by SDG&E, this has the two potential negative effects on CCAs. First is that it can increase costs that flow through the PCIA, and it can also tighten the RA market for CCAs, making it harder to procure needed RA. So after many years of pushing on this issue, the Commission has now provided us a clear procedural path to reviewing SDG&E's conduct against its BPP in the ERA compliance proceeding. So this gives us a direct route to scrutinize SDG&E's RA sales practices. This is one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle is to make sure that the actual bundled procurement plan itself is crafted in a way that is really specific about when SDG&E must sell excess RA and at what price terms and price floors. And so we'll be pursuing those issues as well in the IRP proceeding, the Integrated Resource Plan proceeding. So those are the updates that I have prepared for you today, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions for Tim? Just want to say thank you for some of these good news today.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Where can we get more information if you want to learn more about this? What would you recommend?
Sorry, I'm actually having a really hard time hearing on my end, so I missed the question. More information regarding.
Regarding this, what you just went over, I mean, online or specific site or anything.
I'm really sorry, but the audio on my end is really jumbled.
Hey, Jake, he's asking about additional information on this last item that you covered on resource adequacy in this particular proceeding, error compliance. Where can people get more information about it?
You can certainly go to the CPUC docket card and use that proceeding number that was at the top of the slide, and that will give you kind of the detail, maybe more detail than you're looking for. Otherwise, happy to provide any additional information on any specific questions, either today or through any follow-up that you might have.
And I would encourage the board, we talk about this in briefings, but if you're always welcome to contact me if there's something specific you'd like, we have additional information we can provide. I can tell you that reading through much of these dockets, it can be laborious to say the least. And so trying to distill them down into key talking points or information. So happy to provide that information in a more digestible fashion. If that's
Thank you, Jake, who's joining us today. Appreciate your time. Giving some good news and always staying on top of it for us. Okay, and I'm also curious about any reporting on this. I'm not really seeing a lot of reporting on this.
Yeah, I guess, Chair, I don't know that there's a lot of reporting on this, depending on where you look. It's somewhat a little bit surprising that there are so many dockets and so many proceedings going that much of this information gets lost in that regulatory calendar. I can't say whether or not this will make kind of press and record, there's still a long way to go. This is the scoping up on the stage, so long way to go in what these decisions may or may not say. And so you may start to hear more about this as the proceeding.
I do have a follow-up question to this. Sort of thinking about where we're at, right? We're expecting a new administration to put in at the beginning of next year. So would that have an impact in terms of what we can expect to see? Is it too early to tell?
I think it may be a little too early to tell. What I will say is that we're about to have an update on the legislative side of things. There is a lot of dialogue going on right now, as everyone knows, about affordability, about energy costs, electricity costs, and so any incoming administration, I think, is going to be presented with that same list of high level topics and important topics that both the state legislature as well as CalCCA and other advocates are pushing for in terms of either regulatory or legislative fixes, if you will, to try to address some of this affordability question. So I think that's going to be front and center of any new administration coming in. And I would expect this legislative push to continue into the next legislative calendar, as well as continue to be front and center on the regulatory side. So I don't think these issues are going anywhere, and I would expect the new administration to have to pick these up exactly where they are right now.
Great conversation, thank you. Move on to item 10.
Chair and members of the board, as Dan Pecker mentioned during his presentation on risk oversight, he did talk about contracts and PPAs, and he mentioned alluded to this agreement that we're going to hear about right now. Over to Sophia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sophia Alcaraz, Contracts and Compliance Manager here at TEA. I'm here to present item number 10, requesting your approval of a 25-year energy storage service agreement, or an ESSA, with a long-duration energy storage resource. So the project developer and owner is called GEM, A-CAES, as you see on the screen. Shorthand, I'm just going to say GEM. And this is the recommendation is that we adopt resolution number 2026-038, awarding and approving this ESSA. A little bit of background of why we're requesting approval for this particular contract. As Dan had also mentioned, and as you may remember, the CPUC periodically mandates new procurement from load-serving entities such as CEA. As older non-renewable resources retire on the grid, we lose capacity. And so the idea is to replace that retiring capacity with new additional, more renewable or non-emitting resources. We have fulfilled the requirements from the first two decisions you see on the screen. You may remember last year, the board approved two projects for a solar and storage agreement and then a standalone battery agreement. And the capacity from those two agreements were sufficient to cover the requirements for the MTR and the supplemental MTR decisions. In February, the CPUC released its newest decision, so its newest procurement order, which is mandating an additional 6,000 megawatts of new clean energy and or storage net qualifying capacity between 2030 and 2032. There is kind of a catch with this procurement order, as there's a subcategory for procurement. So 25% of that 6,000 megawatts must come from clean firm resources, so geothermal as an example, or long duration energy storage. With our previously executed long-term contracts, we've fulfilled above and beyond sort of the first two decisions worth of capacity. So we're expected to be compliant with the majority of this new procurement order in the generic requirement category. However, we still have a need to meet the extra 25%, either from a clean firm resource or a long duration energy storage resource. So partially in response to this news procurement order, and then also in line with CEA's long-term renewable goals, we released an RFP in March 2026. We received 0 offers for clean firm resources, but we did receive 15 offers for long duration energy storage projects. We chose to shortlist a few of them, and we are now bringing Willow Rock, the project mentioned, presented by GEM to you for approval because it was both competitively priced and one of the most de-risked projects that we received. When I say de-risked, I mean that the project is further along its development cycle. So there's more certainty that the project will actually be built as promised and on time. And part of what goes into this certainty is that the permitting is all complete for the project. That is both environmental, land siting, all of that. The interconnection agreement has been signed. Resource adequacy benefits have been fully secured. The project also has received a conditional loan guarantee from the DOE to support financing. They're expected to actually close financing by the end of this year. And kind of the final piece is this is a pretty large project. It's 500 megawatts in total. We have a 60 megawatt slice. Most of the rest of the project is already fully contracted, which just adds more certainty to its development. So a little bit more about the proposal itself. As I said before, it's presented by GEM, which is actually a subsidiary of Hydrostore, if you've heard of them. The project is located in Kern County on undeveloped agriculturally zoned land, and there's not a lot of local opposition. The project is guaranteed to be in commercial operation by June 2031 and will go for a term of 25 years. Like I said, we have a 60 megawatt slice of this 500 megawatt project. So when we typically think of long duration energy storage or energy storage in general, you think of lithium ion batteries or something that has more of a chemical composition. This project is a little bit more of an innovative technology for storing energy. It's what's called Advanced Compressed Air Energy Storage, or A-CAES. And so
when we're thinking of battery storage, we think, okay, potential energy is being stored through a chemical process. In this case, energy is being stored through a physical process. So if you look at the picture there, that is kind of like an overview of what the actual site will look like. There's a couple different parts. There's that large water reservoir. There's a couple heat exchangers up top, an air compressor, and then of course, a turbine that generates electricity. The biggest piece of this technology comes underground. And so to build this project, you have to drill about 2,000 feet into the ground to create this hard rock underground cavern. And the way that the energy is stored, so when prices are really low on the grid, say midday hours, with a lot of solar generation, we have that electricity that powers a compressor. The compressor pumps ambient air in to the underground cavern all the way down. The compression of the air creates heat, and the heat is stored on those two things up top. So that's called, it's a heat exchanger, and it's stored there for when we need it later to generate electricity. The air is kept compressed underground using water. And so the air pushes the water down, generating pressure, the air stays compressed. When it's time to discharge the power, the opposite process happens. So the water floods back into the cavern, the air comes out, it's mixed back in with the heat, and then that hot air turns a turbine, which generates electricity. So there's no chemicals involved in this process. The water is all a closed loop system. And so once you put all the water in, it never comes out. You rarely need to add more. So it's virtually zero emissions, and there's little to no degradation because no chemical processes. All right. So the energy storage service agreement is with A-CAES. And it's the structure of the agreement itself is a little bit different than our typical energy storage agreement. Under a typical ESSA, CEA would be the sole recipient of all project benefits, maybe the sole off-taker, and we would be operating the battery in the market ourselves. And so we'd be receiving energy settlement for every hour that the battery is charging and discharging. This is a little bit difficult for projects with multiple off-takers like this one. And so what typically happens is we do a different structure of agreement. This is called a resource adequacy plus top bottom for agreement, or RA plus TB for short. And this was the structure proposed by the developers so that they don't have to separately meter and separate the operations for each off-taker. So it would be about 4 or 5 different meters for a 500 megawatt project. It becomes very complicated. We still keep the 8-hour long duration energy storage resource adequacy capacity, and that fulfills the requirements of the procurement order by the CPUC. But instead of getting the energy settlement revenue for all hours that the battery is charging and discharging, we actually get to look back at the day and say, okay, what were the top most economic hours? You get the discharging revenue from those hours, and you net that against the 4 cheapest or least expensive hours, and that is the revenue you get. So you basically get the revenue from the spread of the top most economic, the least economic hours of the day. So this is still a really good hedge against peak load exposure and price volatility in the market. And it actually functions a little bit better than if we were to do, say, a TB8. So this is an 8-hour battery, right? But if we look at the spread of the top 8 hours and the lowest 8 hours, it becomes a lot more flat. And so the value that we're getting could be potentially a lot lower, and the risk is higher that we're actually paying in the market rather than receiving revenue. And so the TB fee structure is a lower risk way of looking back at, or of managing this type of ESSA structure. So I know that's a little complicated, so questions welcome. The main benefits of the project to conclude, this project will basically close out. It's expected to close out our procurement order requirements for that subcategory for long duration energy storage. I want to point out this isn't an either or situation for us with LDES or geothermal. We're still actively pursuing geothermal for our long-term goals. We get the resource adequacy 8-hour energy storage capacity. We are getting a hedge on long-term energy price volatility in the peak load hours. Energy storage, as you all know, provides more grid stability. It shifts our reliance away from fossil fuels that to ramp on real fast in the evening hours. And we would be investing in an innovative non-fossil fuel technology. Any questions?
Thank you for that robust report. Do you have any public comments on this?
We don't have any public comment on this item.
Okay. Any questions, comments from the board?
First of all, it's really cool.
Very cool.
And really interesting. My question is, are all the preparers going to be on the same RA plus TV4 contract? Or they're all going to be doing the same?
All the off-takers for it. No, we've all signed independent contracts, but naturally, you know, the terms are fairly similar. They have to be. But we have significant protections in the contract, and we did negotiate separately.
And with us getting in, is it all spoken for now, or is there? still
It's
some
almost,
more?
there's a little bit left, which they're actively trying to market. But the financing, so our piece is kind of the last piece that they needed to close financing.
Thank you so much. Really exciting. And one of the things I just wanted to know, with 4 or 5 other members sharing this resource, how competitive was this contracting process for us? Maybe just give us some insights on this process.
Yeah, so this project has been marketed for, I think, the past 1.5 to 2 years. So like I said, this was part of a solicitation, and before us, public knowledge, there were 2 other contracts that were signed, and so we were kind of the third in the process. It's less of a give and take, I think, at this point, because they do need to contract the rest of the project to close financing.
I'm glad we're able to cover our people at hours. This is an additional resource. Thank you so much. And that'll cover that item. Thank you. I agree. It's very cool. Oh, we do have approval for this item. Okay. Do you have a motion?
Yeah,
Motion second? Okay, okay, wonderful. So
Board Member Stylish?
Yeah.
Board Member Buckle? Yes. Board Member Gaines?
yes.
Board Member Joyce?
Yeah.
Board Member Becker?
Yes.
Vice Chair Garcia? Chair Melinda?
Yes. Fantastic. All right, moving on to our final item of legislative update.
If I could just step into, these MFA, but before I do so, I just wanted to thank all of our staff here. As you can see, we're fortunate to have just exceptional people working for us, and it's been exemplified here today. And there's no exception with our regulatory and legislative affairs staff. And Emily has been doing much of that alone for a couple of years now, and so she's going to give a legislative update. And go ahead, Emily.
Everybody for me. It's been a while since our social science days, since I've been maybe a little bit closer. Sure. Thank you. Is that better? Great. Okay. Started here. I'm Emily David. I am representing our regulatory and legislative affairs team here at Clean Energy Alliance. And I'll go ahead and start off our legislative affairs update by mentioning that, and I know a lot of you know this already, but just for everyone's knowledge, the legislature is entering the final phase of the 2026 session. So with major budget and energy policy decisions expected in August, which is next week already. So the next 4 weeks will be pretty busy. But for this update, I just wanted to give an overview of what to expect. So we'll start with the Sacramento update, some state budget highlights, CEA priority legislation that we've been tracking so far this year, some key policy trends in energy that we've been seeing so far this year on the legislative side. And of course, looking ahead then, meaning the next 4 weeks of the session. And we'll also go over an emerging policy issue that has to do with Diablo Canyon, but we will get to that after our overview. So for our Sacramento update, June, as you know, the budget was signed by the governor, so mostly dominated by budget negotiations and ballot discussions for the upcoming November election.
Policy committee work is largely complete at this point, and fiscal bills now face their appropriations committee review, so they will see their fate in the next 4 weeks. There's a lot of hearings coming up next week that we'll be closely tracking. And the legislature, like I mentioned, returns next week and adjourns at the end of August. Okay, and getting to the state budget, the state continues to face a structural deficit, but a stronger than expected tax collections helped avoid significant reductions for this year. So that's one of the good outcomes to come out of things this year. From an energy perspective, though, there are two notable items with the continuation of DEVA and DSGS program funding. And for those who don't know what that is, those programs provide incentives for distributed energy resources, things like batteries, solar panels, microgrids, to help support grid reliability when the grid is stressed. So that was really exciting that that funding is still available. And then one exciting thing for CEA to mention is the $10 million that was appropriated for geothermal exploration, which was exciting. I mentioned for CEA because we recently committed, to geothermal with letters of intent. So overall, the themes of affordability and reliability remain dominant in state energy policy. Moving on to CEA priority legislation, I won't spend too much time here because I know Greg has talked about these bills in previous board meetings. But we do have AB 1761, which is the Energy Bill Transparency Bill, and SB 1138, which is the Hourly Resource Adequacy Trading Bill. These are both bills that are sponsored by CalCCA, and CEA has submitted support letters for these bills, as well as all of the other CCAs in the state. So these are the main bills that we've been providing advocacy efforts for this year. And while both have advanced through much of the legislative process already, the biggest hurdle will come in the next couple of weeks in the appropriations committees and the fiscal committees, because each bill carries a fiscal impact that has been identified by the CPUC. And if you look any further into those bills and do a little digging, you'll see that those long-term benefits of those fiscal impacts outweigh the negatives. So looking at some policy trends that we've been following this year, there are dozens of energy bills out there this year. I only have so much real estate on the slide though, so I just wanted to point out the ones that we've been really actively working on, not just CEA internally, but also with CalCCA and monitoring and working in our trade association committees on. But data centers, of course, have been dominating the headlines. I think everybody knows that now. And also driving numerous legislative proposals. And the legislature is also focused on transmission planning, reliability, those distributed energy resources we talked about already, geothermal development, and electrification strategies. So looking ahead over the next 4 weeks, we'll be finding out if many of these bills will either advance or unfortunately not make it through the next phase of the process. So CEA is going to continue advocating for our priority bills, as we mentioned, with working with CalCCA on those as well. And we're also working on the regulatory side as well on some bills from last year. SB 1221 is one I wanted to call out because that is one we are actively having our staff working with San Diego County and STCP, and that'll be the regulatory implementation of that bill that was passed last year. So we are currently working on that as well. So expect significant policy activity in the next couple of weeks. And I know I rushed through that a little bit because I wanted to make sure that we have enough time for this conversation. But I will stop there if there's any questions.
I do have a question. I don't quite understand how the CPUC, I know you said that for our CEA legislative priority bills, that they are assessing the high economic cost to us. And I don't understand how. Is that just because if the CIA is lower, less money comes in? I just don't understand.
for example, thank you for the question, on the video bill, Senate Bill 1138 that proposes transactability of resource adequacy on an hourly or short-term basis, their initial analysis has been, according to the Energy Division, that would require administrative oversight, putting in the protocols and how to create that market and manage it and regulate it, that cost is higher than their perceived benefits of that, of doing those transactions, allowing us to do most of the entities transact in that kind of capacity. That is countered by quite a bit of technical analyses like House CCA that suggests otherwise, but that's just the process these go through, is that when bills like this are proposed that are attempting to change a regulatory process at the PUC, their staff is to go through this process to identify what those costs might look like, and then get into the details about why, which is accurate. So that's what they're looking at, is that they believe the cost to implement something of this order is kind of changed, and the platform that would have to be established to exceed the cost of the benefit for saving those sort of entities money.
Understand that. It just seems that they have a process right now, so that there's some costs that they're doing right now, but I guess they're setting up a new process.
That's essentially high level.
And thank you.
Thanks for the question. So I think if everyone is okay, we can go ahead and move on to our policy discussion. Okay. This has to do with Diablo Canyon Power Plant up in San Luis Obispo County. And what staff has been doing, we've been monitoring discussions regarding a potential extension of legislation on Diablo Canyon, and we've been monitoring this for quite some time this year. I just want to be upfront before this conversation starts that no legislation has been introduced to date, so we don't know anything, and we won't know anything until probably next week after. So the scope and the timing of any sort of proposal remains uncertain. However, there have been some recent regulatory approvals for those who have been following this issue on the state and the federal side that indicate that there might be some policy discussions coming in the next couple weeks. And any operation beyond 2030, which is the current deadline for operations, would require action by the California legislature, which is why we wanted to have this conversation today with you all. So I just kind of wanted to take a step back of, some of the things we talk about internally policy-wise. So potential legislation like this could affect reliability planning, state clean energy policy, resource procurement requirements, long-term capacity and energy markets, and future IRP options. And in the context of CEA resource planning, I know you've heard this before, but just to kind of go over it again, CEA's recent resource strategy emphasizes things like affordability, reliability, carbon-free energy, local benefits, things that we have in our policy platforms and things like that, that we're always watching out for to advocate for CEA and CCAs in general. And CEA is already pursuing long-duration storage, geothermal, and Scipio was just talking about, and other clean farm resources, demand-side resources, and reliability-focused procurements. So the current connection for Diablo Canyon and CEA is that we do currently receive allocation of Diablo Canyon's carbon-free attributes for our Clean Impact Plus offering. And under current law, Diablo Canyon cannot be included as a future resource option in our IRP portfolios, but the future legislation, future extension of Diablo Canyon could potentially change this. And that's, again, why we wanted to have this conversation before the legislation returns from recess. So now that we're at the discussion portion of this, just a quick recap and overview. If extension legislation is introduced within the next week or so, should CEA staff have flexibility to engage on legislation that advances priorities that are already in our legislative platform, things like affordability, reliability, carbon-free energy sources, things that we're already monitoring internally and advocating for. And some staff considerations that I've outlined here, continued operation of Diablo Canyon appears generally consistent, like I said, with CEA's existing platform goals. And those priorities, as we've already discussed. And given the significance of this issue, and there's a lot of talk about this issue, we're seeking board input on future advocacy and engagement. So staff is recommending that we have the flexibility to engage on future legislation, of course, with Greg and our internal managers to align with CEA's priorities and potentially engage on any legislation that has to do with Diablo Canyon.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for that presentation, and I just wanted to reintroduce this to the board. A couple of things I wanted to point out that were presented in the presentation. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission did extend the license for this facility to have both reactors extended through 2044 and then one of the reactors through 2025. Coastal Commission's recent extension allows it to go beyond 20 under certain conditions, and the Coastal Commission has several conditions for land management, environmental concerns, other issues. It does allow it to go beyond 2030. However, under current state law or state law caveat, the facility isn't allowed to extend past 2030 at the present time without action. So that's why there's been these discussions, these successive at the federal and state level to potentially make way for this project to extend past 2030. And because of the state caveat, that's why this legislation is anticipated. We don't know, again, as I stated clearly, whether or not this will happen in this month or this session. But we do want to have this discussion in the event that it does and see where the board lands in terms of how flexible we should be with this. I will state that when these discussions were ongoing early on, LCCA was engaged and started looking at whether it would take a position and if so, under what conditions. And so it's a very involved discussion, but LCCA is actively looking at the conditions under which it may support extension beyond this should legislation come into text and presented this session.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily, for calling this item and bringing it to the board for discussion. Do you have any public comments on this item?
We don't have any public comment on this.
Okay, so I'll start the discussion to say that I do want to empower staff to have some, word on this. And when there are these discussions for our legislative advocacy staff to be present for those and prioritizing our existing legislative platform. When it comes to nuclear and Diablo Canyon in particular, the board hasn't taken a position, right? So advocating for one position or another or a different position entirely, I think we'd have to be clear on, what direction you want to provide rather than kind of loose general reflection of our current legislative platform. So I know we've had some discussion on nuclear in the past, but because the board see how would you like to prepare for these discussions?
Question, Greg, how does this work? Association and sort of CCA level, is there that the kind of thing that would get hashed out and that would become a clean energy position on this? I mean, I know PG&E wants this as well because they need it, and their ratepayers probably will ultimately want it and back to Paradise Fire. But is this something that they're going to look at each one of us individually make position on, or is this going to turn into a pyramidal clean energy position on setting the other end?
Thank you for that question. So at this point, the Cal CCA, as a trade organization that represents all the CCAs in California, is comprised of a board, of which I am a member. All the CEOs are members of that board, managed by an executive director. And as I mentioned, because this is becoming such a topical issue and that legislation was anticipated, the way that this would potentially work and how all actions of the board work are there's a vote of the board, and they take the input from board members. They ask board members to solicit input from their own boards. I will say that there are a small few of the boards in the state that have an overt proposal of nuclear facilities. That's the minority of the CCAs, I would say. The majority of CCAs have taken the allocation of resources from Diablo Canyon. But as yet, there has not been a vote by Cal CCA to say, okay, where does the board stand on this? So each CCA is being asked to have these discussions with their boards. Some boards have taken a position already that they support the extension of Diablo Canyon. But there's not a majority yet of those boards that have done that. And so this is a discussion we didn't expect because legislation hasn't come to fruition. Personally, I didn't expect one to come in this last few weeks, but that doesn't mean it won't. So having this discussion now would at least give us some sort of barometer as to where the board might stand. Chair is accurate. We haven't taken a specific, does the board support the extension of Diablo Canyon? But we did want to have this discussion. So in the event that it happens, we might have some assessment as to where the board might land in such a decision should it come to the board.
I guess my last comment on that would be, I don't know, I don't feel comfortable having that up or down question without some context as to what is the legislation, what I'm saying, at the risk of having some of my constituents come down. I mean, I think it's naive to say nuclear doesn't have a place in the future. All the innovations that are taking place. So I'm not reflexively anti-nuclear. I'm for safe nuclear, and I'm also for keeping the lights on. And if they make the case that to get us to that renewable California, they need to have the lights on for another 10 years. I think we need to see what the case looks like before we flexibly take a position. I just want to.
Well, I'll reflect that.
No.
And I'll just reflect that, I would immediately provide conditional support for a, limited extent. Based off of those policy platforms that we've discussed before, right? Ensuring that this type of extension lowers customer costs and reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Those would be my priorities. There are constituents that have really strong feelings and really high priorities for eliminating the use of nuclear energy entirely. I don't share those. So I think kind of amongst the board, we might have a little bit more openness towards an extension. But we still have our CEA priorities, which are lowering costs for our customers and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That can be partially accomplished with an extension, but it's not really, the extension of Diablo Canyon is not necessarily going to change our operations. So taking a neutral position on it, I don't think is also a bad idea because it can be a contentious conversation.
Yeah, I really appreciate just that you all know how I feel about this. I'm definitely an advocate for nuclear, and I think the extension of this is paramount to getting close to clean energy. To your point, I do think that a modest extension, I think, is reasonable. And I don't think anyone here, including myself, thinks that we should power the entire region with nuclear. But to the point that was made earlier, I think that this gets us keeping the lights on for those 10 years while we get to the desired goal of getting totally clean, renewable energy through different avenues, realistic approach between wind, solar, hydrogen, et cetera. I think in the meantime, we would really move was to keep this as an option and to, again, have a modest, to advocate for a modest extension. I don't think we need to do another 10, 20 years to make sure that we have this option. You know, I've been studying this carefully, you know, and we don't want to fall into this situation that other places, other countries close out nuclear plants, and now they're in other countries. We don't want that to be our case with other energy companies. You know, I think the last thing we want is to have a setback where we don't have enough energy and now we're relying again on fossil fuels. That's my
Thank you. So I think in our bylaws, our policies, it says that we be using renewable energy, so we would have to make a change in some area.
So the goal of our JPA agreement, to your question or your comment, is to have the 100% renewable by 2035. And yes, we might have to change that should this be a part of the CEA board directive to participate in this allocation. I think even without that, and Dan mentioned in his report that at some point soon here, we're going to be up beyond 75% renewable, 60% requirement, 60% renewable requirement as of 2030. So we'll have discussions as to whether or not how we want to fill that carbon-free obligation. That said, we do and should have a conversation about what our goals are. That's part of what we'd like to discuss with the board at our retreat in November, as to whether or not that 100% renewable goal is where we should be or are headed, given the constraints on 24/7 firm renewable resources and how difficult they are to obtain, contract for, and whatnot. So it is to your comment, yes, if this is something in our future that, should this come to pass, should legislation be drafted, and just for the sake of argument, the allocation is extended for whatever period of time, in order for CEA to take advantage of that resource long-term beyond 2035, we either need to modify our JPA language to be more along the lines of carbon-free as a resource for long-term planning, clean energy as a defined term, or whether or not the board wants to stay with the 100% renewable. We may also be looking at the potential for extending out that goal if needed, if 100% renewable is the goal. You know, the state of California is a 2045 goal for 100% renewable. A lot of things to consider, but to be direct, yes, we would have to revisit that policy in the JPA.
I'm not comfortable with that. I'm comfortable that we have started this CCA to be leaders in this industry, and if we're just going to go backwards, and there is nowhere to put the nuclear spent energy as of now. And so, I have read in the paper that some states are willing to take it now, but until there's a permanent solution to some of these things, I think that we started this for a reason, and I just still want to continue to be leaders in this area. And we talked, we formed this road, talked about being renewable by 2035, and I still want to have that goal. And I am not willing to say that, I don't want to be the person extending nuclear. I appreciate where you're coming from, Rebecca, especially because it's one thing to, support an extension when we're looking at a whole portfolio, right, of energy options. But to consider how we would have to change our agreements, so our foundational agreements, that's a much larger undertaking and obligation for all of our member cities. So it's something that we would have to think about very seriously, that, I would feel comfortable putting forward a motion today either way on positions the board might take on this. If there is kind of consensus building or ideas amongst the board as to what a clear direction we can provide for staff beyond an individual position. I would love to hear that, just because you are coming to us asking for some direction today. And it looks like based on our agreements, we would have to spend a little bit more time discussing this before we'll get in a row.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation and interesting discussion for sure. Just a few clarifying questions, and then I can share some of my comments. I know you're asking from a recommendation standpoint, just for some flexibility with regards to engaging on future legislation. I wanted to ask, when we're talking about engaging, that can mean a lot of different things, at least in my mind. It could mean, informational or process level matters. It could mean, just being able to respond to information requests. And then of course, the other piece is actual active, like advocacy, where we would be a part of that. So if we're talking about, I guess I'm curious, let me ask that question first, and then I have my comments associated with that. Are you talking about specifically, taking a position, or actually engaging in other ways that I mentioned?
Thanks for the question. And to be clear, we're not asking for any action to be taken here. This discussion is valuable, and we can hear what board members, their opinions. I think the form of engagement can take many levels.
Yeah.
The level of engagement can take many forms. For example, discussions that we've been engaged with at CalCCA and with others are, if it is extended, under what conditions might that, would there be potential support? If it happens, any extension should provide the following long list of things to consider. So those would be matters in which we're looking for some flexibility to say, okay, yeah, we think those are reasonable. I'm not in a position at this point, given this discussion, to be able to say unequivocally, yeah, our board supports the extension of Diablo Canyon. In fact, I think every CCA is having this discussion right now and trying to find out under what conditions or whether, if at all, there's a support for the extension. So the kind of flexibility we're looking for is, again, to continue to engage on this, to express to our, probably in the confines of a CalCCA board meeting, the discussion we had. What are the concerns? What are the comments? Where might CEA land should it be presented as a formal action? Those kinds of comments are the flexibility that we've been looking for. At no point would I suggest that we take this conversation and say we vote to extend or support the legislation that would extend Diablo Canyon, unless and until this board takes that action.
Yeah, and that's helpful clarity, just because those were the questions I had. And for me, I feel like having the flexibility to engage on information level matters. What, like you shared, I think that to me, okay, if we are going to take some sort of formal position, obviously it sounds like it would come back to us, and I appreciate that it would. I think that's the part where it would be really important. I know it sounds like we have a lot of different opinions up here, and some may be similar and overlapping, but I feel like it would be helpful to make sure that when it does get to that point, being able to have a larger discussion on where we all stand would be helpful. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Are there other comments from Chair?
Maybe fleshing out what the end of the road looks like for the Yellow Canyon. That happens, if nothing happens legislatively, like what does that mean for energy costs to our ratepayers and to the state of California? Because that goal is a shared goal. So I just think it's probably context that we need conversation. I probably won't be here for that conversation, but If I get a chance to be,
Thank you for this discussion. Just to maybe add a few more points, when you offer an opportunity to discuss, a list of conditions, my mind starts going, what do we have to make sure is on the table? And sometimes it's not even about, agreeing or supporting the item, but it's about making sure that knowing that the item could pass and go through, we are prepared with conditions to fight for and put in. So in addition to the conversation about affordability, I also think that safety is very important, right? That high standards of safety are met as part of the conditions for, where we would clamor for safety. But also if there is any extension that it avoids, or that it doesn't delay any procurement of those 100% renewable options. This is not a substitute for 100% renewable, but it is, I think, meant to be a way to avoid fossil fuel generation. And then, in addition to not delaying procurement of 100% renewable energy, I would say a condition needs to be that it assures reliability, not just enhances reliability, but that we assure that there is greater reliability from the extension, and to prevent blackouts and other larger energy deficit events. So I think I could, encourage that to be included on the list of conditions. But I think Member Bagatelle brings up an important point. Information seeking, that bringing things back to us so that we can advocate for our positions as possible would be very helpful.
Thank you. I was just thinking, and I'm gonna think out loud here, so just, Mr. Wade, you can tell me if this would be too much or if it's even something that would be appropriate for us to think about doing, but I was trying to figure out how we could, I know we can discuss it here, but I'm just knowing how much folks care about this particular topic. I was trying to figure out a medium for us to be able to collectively put all of it together and maybe bring something more cohesive for all of us to figure out how we want to engage in that. I was curious if there was any way that our team here would be willing to put together something where, and I'm going to look at our attorney, where we could give feedback. I know we've done that in other agencies on specific things, whether it's anonymous or it's associated with our names, and then of course publicly disclosing, what it would be at whatever meeting. But I was just thinking that way we have the opportunity to really think through. We're doing that here, but just really collectively put together whatever conditions those might be, whatever else it might be, so that everyone gets that equal opportunity to put it together. And then hopefully from that, coming up with whatever themes kind of percolate so that we can say, based on the collective feedback, this is what we see. Our board is collectively okay with deviating on this and then having a discussion. This is literally just, I just was thinking about it as we were discussing, so I totally understand if it's out of left field, but I wanted to bring it up just as a way for us to potentially have a better opportunity to make sure that we don't rush into making some sort of decision that doesn't necessarily jive with the entire board. So I'll put it to our attorney and our CEO to see if that's even something that would be cool. And then of course, I'd love to hear what the board thinks. Or if you need clarity, if it didn't.
Well, so thank you for that question. So the first part of your question, we'd be happy to assemble some information with the information we've been able to amass, as well as whatever disposable information, conditions of potential conditions for expansion, those kinds of things. How we gather input on such information outside the context of a board meeting is something I would refer to the general counsel on. We could And we can't, I don't think we can necessarily distill that into a formal board position, but it would certainly be educational for us and helpful to us in these ongoing discussions.
Yeah, I don't anticipate that it was supposed to be a position per se. It was more of like information seeking and making sure that whether it's the next board meeting or whatever, timeline you all feel makes sense, just being able to have that information so that all of us get to see it and it's available. But I saw that you unmuted as well.
It sounds like what your idea is somehow the board members provide one-on-one input, feedback to staff about what you individually think, and then staff somehow put that together and present it to the whole board and the public at the same time. Is that your idea?
Yes, in my head, I was thinking more of a survey, so you didn't have to sit and talk to us, because I understand that would be, difficult, and also from like a public standpoint, at the very least, with like a survey format, it's easily written, people can access it, it's not something that we've talked about behind closed doors, which I obviously don't want to do that, I want to make sure it's a transparent process, so that was what I was thinking, because I know we've done that at other agencies where we've definitely filled out other surveys, it's all available, and then aggregated into something. So that was where the thought came from.
Yes, so that, something like that would be possible. The Brown Act just, it's you all talking to each other and creating a forum outside of the rest of the meeting. So if it's a survey or other written type or verbal information that staff is collecting and presenting it to the board and the public, there's a way to do that and comply with the Brown Act. Absolutely.
I have a follow-up clarifying question. One of the things that I'm having a tough time really reconciling based on the comments that I've heard so far. When I look at our slide that says staff recommendation, support staff flexibility to engage on future legislation that aligns with CEA's priorities. Thinking about member Becker's comments about needing to possibly change our foundational documents. So in thinking through, one of the things that for me, I would like to make sure that I receive, that the public receives its information on where are we and what potentially is being considered to be changed. For me, as I sit here, that's not clear, right? Are we looking to deviate from what are our priorities? Are we looking to deviate? And are we doing this prematurely, not knowing where we're headed or where the legislature is headed? So for me, those things are not clear. So receiving a survey, I don't think it's going to help me to piece together. If that helps.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, and I'm glad you made them because I just want to clarify something. If, for the sake of argument, legislation was put forward that supported close the extension of Diablo Canyon, and it passed and was signed by the governor, whoever the governor may be at the time, that doesn't mean that would force us, even if that happened, to modify our policies, our goals, our JPA. We would just not take that. We would just not buy energy from Diablo Canyon. It would be an unused resource. We would, if the board chose not to modify our 100% renewable goal, we just wouldn't, that's not a renewable energy source, carbon free. So we would be in a position of procuring renewable resources and not taking renewable or energy from Diablo Canyon. So it's not as though legislation that might come forward for us engaging in discussions would force us to have to modify our JPA policy. That's a separate discussion, distinct from this. What I will say is that as a carbon-free resource, we have been taking advantage of this. It supplies almost 90% of the total electricity generation in the state of California right now. That's not as substantial, and so it does provide a valuable resource. We've been taking advantage of that. But if our board chose to have a shorter time frame, that was discussed, and I'm not saying this is where we land. I just want to impress upon the board that an extended facility at Diablo County does not in and of itself necessitate us modifying or amending our JPA goals. It doesn't. It would just change our portfolio procurement outlook for
real quick, just for clarification, this is until 2032, correct?
No, it's currently extended through 2030. The NRC has extended has provided an extension to 2045. Regulatory Commission. The state of California's Coastal Commission approved the extension of this facility under specific conditions to 2030. After 2030, it may continue to operate, provided legislative action is taken.
So, I mean, even in 2030, that was still called, well before our goal.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
yes, okay.
So, and the other thing I just wanted to mention is that given whatever may or may not happen at the legislature in this session, if a bill comes forward, if it is proposing to extend the allocation past 2030, I have based on what I'm hearing, I have the ability to abstain from any vote unless we come to the board prior to the end of August within an emergency setting or convening that August board meeting, which may be too late. August 27th, I'm scheduled for, which, by the way, I'm planning to cancel. I always have the luxury of abstaining from a vote if we're being asked to take an affirmative.
Can you explain the legislative timeline? You said something might be introduced next week, so then when would it look to go through the whole process of being voted on?
I don't know anything about that.
It's, I mean, generally it takes a lot of time to get through all those.
Correct.
And he's and all that stuff too.
Yeah, I'm personally not convinced that it's going to happen, but if it does, it would have to work through because committees, as Emily pointed out, all the committee proceedings policy committees have met and convened on legislation. So I'm not sure there's somebody who's probably more of a legislative wonk to know that these things may happen in some kind of framework, but I'm just not sure what that is. I do know that the legislative calendar ends in this month.
I just want to show my support for a few of the comments that were made. I do support doing a little bit more consensus building on the board. And then also, although it's not necessary for us to procure energy from Diablo Canyon, if we were to continue utilizing that resource and there was potential for us to review our agreements, I think that puts us in a position where we need to be having specialized workshops for the community. That is a big undertaking, and when I say that, I mean not just a decision for the board, but at any point I'm serving on the board at that time, if that occurs, I'm going to expect a high amount of public participation, especially if the change in our agreement move away from 100% renewable resources is changed to something that's more flexible to allow for nuclear options. I would be advocating for us to process and changing those agreements so that can be undertaken. I think that if we were to, we're moving towards a goal in 2035 where we are going to actually be eliminating nuclear energy from our portfolio. So that's currently what our goal is, and it's not because of certain position about nuclear energy, it's because of definitions around 100% renewable energy. And so I think this conversation is really important because there are groups who are advocating specifically for nuclear energy who might not have the same conditions about nuclear energy that our group might have. So I do appreciate you asking those questions. I want to reflect a little bit and hear kind of feedback from staff. Do you have the information you need, anything like clarity on as we wrap up this discussion?
I think we've had a very good discussion about this, and I appreciate the candor of the board. I think we have enough, and we'll do what we can to provide additional information. And And again, some of this may be premature, but it's always important to have this conversation. And if anything changes, obviously, he'd know right away.
Any other comments?
I have one request. Can I get a copy of the slides?
Absolutely.
All right, great discussion. Thank you all so much. That brings us to the end of our meeting. We are anticipating a break in August, but we do have a meeting scheduled on the 27th. Are there any requests for future agenda items? No, you're keeping us very busy. Thank you so much to our wonderful staff, and we are adjourned.